Antony Loewenstein is a journalist and author of The Palestine Laboratory. It's a book on Israel's arms and surveillance industry. He's joining us from Sydney. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Hezbollah has released a statement saying that it is ready to face any Israeli ground offensive, but as yet, we're not entirely clear to what extent it would be able to do that.
Look, it's obviously unclear. I think Hezbollah clearly is still going to be in a position to fight. I mean, clearly in the last weeks they've been decapitated to an extent. Much of their leadership is now dead. I think Hezbollah and many elements in Iran have been frankly shocked and stunned by the Israeli attacks, the ability to have no red lines. But there's no doubt, I think, that when Israel is now in southern Lebanon, there'll be fighting, there'll be conflict, and there's no doubt that many people in that part of Lebanon hate Israel, have hated them for years, in fact, for decades. That people have not forgotten the occupation from the 1980s and the war in 2006, which devastated parts of southern Lebanon and Beirut. So history is there. People have not forgotten that. And Israel, I think, will not be welcomed with roses and petals, put it that way.
One of the significant features of this current conflict between Israel and Hezbollah is the extent to which Israel appears to have been able to penetrate Hezbollah's communications networks with the use of intelligence gathering as well. In your assessment, given the fact that you've done a book on Israel's arms and surveillance industry, how deeply do you think that may have gone, and how effectively do you think Hezbollah might be able to circumvent whatever penetration there's been?
Look, the penetration of Hezbollah has been deep. My understanding is, speaking to various sources in the last weeks, that a lot of this began during the Syrian civil war, where Hezbollah, of course, was on the side of Assad and assisted his brutality in that war. And at that point, there was such an influx of Hezbollah fighters into Syria that Israel was able to collect over years massive amounts of intelligence. This was partly through Unit 8200, which is Israel's intelligence arm, akin to the NSA in the US. And I think over time, obviously, Israel has also had a number of spies, moles within Hezbollah. I mean, there's been reports in the last days that an Iranian source actually gave the location of Nasrallah in the minutes or moments before he was killed. Whether that's true, I don't know. But it wouldn't surprise me, because in the last decade or so, there's been huge amounts of Israeli attacks in Iran, and a number of Iranians have been working with the Israelis. So Hezbollah is undeniably damaged, not defeated, but damaged. And Iran is also concerned about whether their own leadership has been compromised in intelligence. But ultimately and eventually, Israel may well have struck Hezbollah and killed its leader and many of its leadership, but none of this actually brings long-term security to Israel. None of it does. Because what Israel has wanted really since 1948, and that's continued, is some kind of legitimacy, security, or safety in the region. And none of that will be achieved by any of these actions. In fact, if anything, in the last year, the killing of 40, 50, 60,000 Palestinians in Gaza, the slaughter that we're seeing in Lebanon in the last few weeks, has made more people more angry, not just in the Arab Muslim world, but in the world in general. And that legitimacy that Israel craves will not happen. In fact, the opposite. It's making more Israelis unsafe and more Jews like myself globally more unsafe. That's the sad reality at the end of all this, whenever that happens.
We, of course, have reports of Israeli attacks in Syria near Damascus. It's also, as we're discussing, targeting Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. There's Hamas in Gaza. Those attacks still going on. It's targeting Houthi fighters in Yemen. And, of course, there are the ongoing raids, daily raids, in the occupied West Bank. Do you think that despite the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu seems to have a groundswell of support within Israel, he's got the US at his back as well, that there is a risk that Israel is going to overextend itself?
Well, the short answer is yes, because at the moment Israel feels emboldened. No one is stopping them. As you say, the US has given them carte blanche. I mean, we constantly hear pretty much for 12 months now that Joe Biden is concerned, or he's upset, or he's angry with Netanyahu. It's all meaningless nonsense, because ultimately he's still providing the weapons, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. So, and that's also, I would say, similar with much of the European countries and, frankly, much of the Arab world, who, talking Arab leaders here, not Arab people, who have spoken out for months critically of Israel but have done nothing tangible against them. There's been no cutting of ties, there's been no sanctions, no stopping of buying Israeli weapons or surveillance tech, which the Arab countries have done for years. So Israel is undeniably stretched. And again, at the end of the day, whenever this finishes in 6 months or a year, whenever, none of this is bringing Israel safety because the occupation of Palestine is now permanent. There are now 750,000 settlers in the West Bank. That number is expected to massively grow in the coming years. Gaza has been made unlivable. Israel was living essentially as a fortress, as a garrison state, almost as a ghetto. And there's a real irony as someone who is Jewish myself, who sees Israel as apparently a safe haven for Jews, as Israel claims to be. And yet ultimately it's the most dangerous place on the planet to be a Jew. That's just a statement of fact. There's no question about that. And all this kind of violent lashing out in an attempt to try to neuter any kind of legitimate resistance against Israel when the occupation is illegal has been since its beginning is not just sad, but also flagrantly immoral. And I think many, many Israelis and frankly, many supporters of Israel are blind to that reality.
Antony Loewenstein, we're very grateful to you for being with us on Al Jazeera, so thank you very much indeed.
Thanks so much.